Welcome to my channel. The story begins in the deep reaches of space, on a diplomatic outpost floating between two galaxies, a place where peace was as fragile as glass. It was there that Captain Ethan Ward, a decorated human soldier serving as Earth's envoy security chief, stood guard over an alien princess and her young daughter. The Auran Dominion, a vast empire of light-born beings, had once fought against humanity in the old wars. Now, decades later, both sides tried to build peace, though trust was a currency in short supply. Ethan was weary of politics. He had seen too much blood spilled for flags and pride. But the child, little Lyra, had reminded him of something he'd lost long ago: innocence. Her laughter was the only thing pure aboard that sterile station. Yet even innocence can't survive the shadows that gather when hatred refuses to die. It happened without warning. A fleet of rogue warships emerged from the void, their weapons flaring before the alarms could sound. The outpost shook violently, lights dimming as explosions echoed through its hollow corridors. Ethan grabbed Lyra, shielding her with his own body as debris rained down. Alien guards scrambled, but the attackers were already inside, their energy blades slicing through air and armor alike. A plasma blast tore across the hallway, aimed directly at the child. Ethan didn't think, he moved. He threw himself into its path, the impact throwing him back like a ragdoll. His armor melted, flesh burning, but he didn't let go of the girl. As he fell, his last sight was of her terrified face and the shadows closing in. When he woke again, the world was different. He opened his eyes to soft blue light and strange voices. The air was thick with scentless mist, and the walls glowed as if alive. He realized he was no longer on the outpost. Beside him stood a figure tall and regal, skin like crystal, eyes burning with violet fire. The Auran Queen. Her presence filled the chamber with gravity, beauty, and power. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice echoing in his mind as much as his ears. Ethan tried to speak, but pain silenced him. "You should have died," she continued, "but I would not allow it." She gestured to his chest, and he looked down. Beneath his torn armor, faint lines of light pulsed through his veins, alien energy flowing within him. "My healers used our own life essence to restore you," she said softly. "In doing so, your blood became ours. You belong to the Auran line now." Her words struck him harder than the plasma had. "Belong?" he rasped. "I didn't ask for this." The Queen's gaze was calm but unreadable. "Nor did I ask for my child to live when fate said she would die," she replied. "But here we are, bound by choice neither of us made." She turned away, her long robes shimmering like sunlight through water. "Rest, human. The galaxy will call you hero, but I call you something more. My savior and my burden." From that moment, Ethan's life was no longer his own. He was kept within the Auran Palace, guarded and studied, revered and feared. The people called him the Bloodbound, the mortal who carried the Queen's essence. Some saw him as a miracle, others as an abomination. The Queen herself visited often, though never for long. Each time she did, he saw in her eyes the same storm he felt within himself: guilt, gratitude, and something darker neither dared name. As months passed, Ethan began to understand the true reason behind his confinement. The Auran's lifeblood, the luminous energy that sustained their kind, was dying. Centuries of genetic perfection had left them sterile, their once vast population dwindling. The Queen's healers discovered that his hybridized cells, human grit fused with Auran light, could hold the key to survival. "Your blood restores what ours cannot create," she admitted one night as they stood overlooking the palace gardens. "You are both cure and curse." Ethan's voice was quiet but firm. "Then let me go home. Let your scientists do their work." But she shook her head. "You misunderstand. You are not a subject of study. You are a link. The Auran essence in you binds you to me. If you leave this world, you die, and so do I." Her words left him speechless, bound not by law or duty, but by life itself. In time, he saw the truth in her eyes. The Queen, known across galaxies as unyielding and cold, was afraid. not of death, but of the bond she could no longer control. She began to dream in human visions, oceans, fire, the laughter of children she had never born. The connection worked both ways. Ethan, too, felt her emotions echoing in his mind. Loneliness older than human history, the crushing weight of immortality. And as they shared those silent moments, something impossible began to grow. Understanding. She saw in him what her empire had forgotten. Humility, compassion, the courage to act without permission. He saw in her not a ruler, but a soul trapped beneath duty's chains. But peace never lasts in a universe that fears change. The Galactic Council soon learned of the Auran Queen's bond with a human. The revelation sent shockwaves across the stars. To them, it was an abomination, proof that the Aurans had violated sacred genetic laws. Delegations demanded the human be surrendered to council custody for analysis. The Queen refused. Her denial was not a political act, it was personal. "He is under my protection," she declared before the assembled ambassadors. "Touch him, and you declare war on Aurelius." War came anyway. Fleets gathered on both sides, human and alien, ready to burn each other for reasons few even understood. The Queen's advisors begged her to end the bond, to let the human die and preserve her throne. But she wouldn't. "He took death for my blood," she said coldly. "I will not return the favor." The night before the war began, Ethan found her standing alone beneath the palace's star dome, the galaxy reflected in her eyes. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You can still save your people." She turned to him, her voice trembling for the first time. "If I surrender you, I save nothing worth ruling. If I keep you, I lose everything I was. Tell me, human, what would your kind do?" He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "We'd fight for what we believe in, even if it kills us." She smiled faintly. "Then perhaps humanity's madness has finally become my own." When the Council's fleets arrived, the skies of Aurelius burned. The Queen stood at the heart of her capital, radiant and defiant. Ethan fought beside her, wielding weapons forged from both human steel and Auran light. The two species that had once been enemies now stood shoulder to shoulder, bound by the same heartbeat. The battle raged for hours, and when the dust finally cleared, the galaxy was changed. The Council's armies retreated, their ships shattered by forces they could not comprehend. The combined will of a queen and a human joined by something stronger than blood. After the war, there was no victory celebration, no grand coronation. Only silence. The Queen lay weak, her life force fading from the strain of the battle. Ethan held her in his arms beneath the ruins of the palace. "You can't die," he whispered. She smiled faintly, her light flickering. "I am not dying, Ethan. I am becoming what I was meant to be." She touched his chest, and her energy flowed into him, pure and blinding. "Our bond began in sacrifice. Let it end in peace." The light consumed them both, rising toward the heavens like a new star. When the light faded, the world of Aurelius was reborn. The Queen was gone, but her essence lived on in him and in every Auran who could now live without the hive. Her people would later call it the dawn of two souls, the day humanity and Aurelius became one. And as for Ethan, legends say he still walks among the stars, his eyes burning faintly with her light, guarding the peace they built together. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if you believe in the strength of humanity and the power of compassion among the stars, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more cinematic HFY sci-fi stories on Sci-Fi Tales. Humanity is more than a species. It's a force that even the galaxy must learn to feel. The days that followed were strange and filled with silence. Ethan's body healed faster than any human doctor could explain, yet his mind struggled to accept what had been done to him. The palace of Aurelius was unlike any structure he had ever seen. Alive and humming with energy, its walls glowed like liquid glass, shifting color with the Queen's emotions. He could feel it all, every pulse of the place, as if it were inside his skin. The medics told him that his body had stabilized only because the Queen herself had poured part of her essence into his blood. That energy was now his, flowing through his veins like a second heartbeat. Sometimes he would wake in the night, gasping, his vision filled with light and distant whispers. He could hear the thoughts of the Auran palace. Guards, attendants, even the queen's daughter, Lyra. Their minds brushed his own like wind across an open field, and though they didn't speak, he could feel their emotions. It was beautiful and terrifying. The bond had changed him, and every passing day he became less certain where his humanity ended and the alien part began. The queen visited rarely at first. Her presence was overwhelming, tall, graceful, eyes burning with the light of distant suns. Every movement she made seemed to bend the air, and when she spoke, it was like hearing the echo of the stars. She would stand by his bedside, her expression unreadable, and study him with quiet intensity. "Your species is fragile," she said once, her tone neither cruel nor kind. "And yet you held back death itself. Tell me, human, why risk everything for a child who was not your own?" Ethan's voice was still weak. "Because she needed me." The queen tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "Is that all?" He nodded. "That's enough." She looked away, her robes shimmering like water. "Strange," she murmured. "For us, duty demands reason. You act without one." Days turned into weeks. The palace physicians taught him to control the energy coursing through his body, warning that if left unchecked, it could consume him. He learned that the Auran life force was not mere biology but a living current, something spiritual, a thread that connected every life in their empire. To hold it without training was like grasping lightning. But as the queen's healers tested his limits, they discovered something extraordinary. His human body did not reject the Auran essence. It adapted to it. The energy changed him, strengthened him. Where an Auran's power flowed smoothly, his pulsed like a storm, chaotic yet powerful. "He shouldn't be alive," one of the medics whispered. "He shouldn't exist." The queen silenced them with a single glance. "He exists because he chose to," she said. "Do not question what sacrifice creates." One evening, when the palace grew quiet and the great spires of Aurelius shimmered beneath their twin moons, Ethan found himself summoned to the queen's private garden. The air there was thick with luminous petals drifting through the sky like glowing snow. At the center stood the queen, her daughter Lyra asleep in her arms. The child stirred and reached toward him, smiling faintly even in sleep. "She dreams of you," the queen said softly. "In her mind, she sees you as light. She says you feel like warmth." Ethan knelt beside them, unsure how to respond. "I only did what anyone would have done," he said. "No," the queen replied, her tone sharp but trembling. "No one would have done what you did. You are different." She looked down at her daughter and then at him. "And because of that, we are now bound. Do you understand what that means?" He shook his head. "I understand you saved my life." She sighed, the sound echoing like wind through hollow crystal. "When I gave you my essence to heal you, I gave you a piece of my spirit. Our lives are now intertwined. If you die, a part of me will die as well. If I fall, you will feel it." Ethan froze, realizing the weight of her words. "You mean I can't leave?" "You cannot survive away from Aurelius," she said simply. "Your body depends on my energy now. It sustains you. Without it, your heart will fail within hours." He stood there for a long moment, stunned. "Then I'm your prisoner." The queen's eyes narrowed, though not in anger. "You are not a prisoner, human. You are a part of my realm now. A part of me." Her words lingered in his mind long after she left. Prisoner or not, he was trapped. Yet part of him didn't hate it. The city was magnificent, streets of living crystal, rivers of light, and skies that shimmered with every passing hour. The people watched him wherever he went, some bowing in reverence, others turning away in disgust. They called him the blood-taken, the mortal who shared their queen's essence. Some whispered he was a divine omen. Others claimed he was a blasphemy. At night, he would hear their thoughts echo faintly through the bond, 1,000 emotions bleeding into his dreams. Fear, awe, resentment, and sometimes a strange admiration. As the days passed, the queen began to visit more often. Sometimes she came to question him about Earth, its wars, its history, its people. Other times, she simply watched him in silence. She asked why humans built art if it served no survival purpose, why they loved when love so often led to suffering. He answered as best he could. "Because it makes life worth living," he said one evening. "Even when it hurts." The queen had no reply, but that night, when he closed his eyes, he felt something in the bond. A pulse, faint but warm, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. Weeks turned into months, and something in her began to shift. The queen who once ruled with perfect control started hesitating in council meetings. Her advisors noticed her growing restlessness. She would pause mid-sentence, as though lost in thought, her fingers brushing against her chest where the bond pulsed faintly. They whispered that the human's influence had poisoned her, that his emotions were infecting her mind. When they demanded he be executed to break the link, she silenced them with a single word. No, the sound was final, the kind of command that had ended wars. But beneath that authority, her eyes flickered with something the court had never seen before: fear. That night, she appeared in his chamber unannounced, standing by the window as the twin moons poured silver light over her. "Do you feel it?" she asked quietly. "The pull between us?" Ethan met her gaze. "Every time I try to ignore it." She nodded slowly. "So do I." For the first time, her voice cracked, soft and human. "I don't understand this. No Auran has ever shared a bond like ours. My thoughts, they are no longer my own. When you are in pain, I feel it. When you are angry, I see fire in my dreams." Ethan hesitated. "And when you're afraid?" Her lips trembled. "Then I see myself through your eyes. And that frightens me most of all." Outside, the world of Aurelius continued to shine, but the light within its queen had begun to change. What she had seen in him, his courage, his compassion, his stubborn defiance, had become a mirror she could not look away from. He had given her daughter life, but in doing so, he had awakened something far more dangerous. A heart that had forgotten how to feel. And though neither of them would admit it yet, the bond between them was no longer just survival. It was becoming something the galaxy had never seen before. The beginning of understanding between two souls from opposite worlds. The Queen of Aurelius had ruled her people for nearly 1,000 years without doubt or weakness. Her word was law, her will an unbroken flame that shaped empires. Yet now, for the first time since she took the throne, her heart was not silent. She would sit in her great hall surrounded by ministers and warriors, pretending to listen as they recited reports of border unrest or trade disputes. But her thoughts were never with them. They always drifted to the human, the soldier who had given his life for her daughter and now carried her blood within him. At night she could not sleep. Her dreams were filled with flashes of another world. Oceans of blue water, fields of wind and grass, the sound of laughter and rain. She saw them through his memories, as if his soul had opened a window into humanity itself. Sometimes she woke trembling, her hands clutching the crystal sheets of her bed, whispering words in a language that was not her own. Her attendants whispered that she was unwell. The ministers called it madness. The queen called it something far worse: awakening. Meanwhile, Ethan was learning the price of survival. His human body no longer belonged entirely to him. The Auran energy coursing through his blood made him stronger, sharper, faster, but it also bound him to the queen in ways he could not understand. When she entered a council meeting miles away, he felt the pull like gravity in his chest. When she was angry, the walls around him trembled. When she was calm, the air grew soft and luminous. It was as if his very pulse followed her mood. The medics told him this was normal, that the bond between their essences was permanent. But Ethan could see the fear in their eyes. He was becoming something neither human nor Auran, and they didn't know what to do with him. He didn't know what to do with himself either. Each day he wandered the palace gardens, his mind full of questions he couldn't ask. Was he still human if his life depended on alien blood? Was the queen his captor, his healer, or something else entirely? One evening, the queen came to him unannounced, as she often did when the weight of her crown grew too heavy. She found him standing beneath the vast glass canopy that overlooked the city, the lights of Aurans glowing like stars below. "You should not be here alone," she said softly. "My people still fear you." He turned, meeting her gaze. "They fear what they don't understand. That's something we humans know all too well." She approached him, her robes gliding like liquid silver across the floor. "Your kind confuses me," she admitted. "You kill one another over lines drawn on rock, and yet you throw yourself into death for a child who was not your own. What drives such contradictions?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe it's that we're not afraid to feel, even when it hurts." The Queen's expression faltered, a flicker of something fragile beneath her perfect mask. "Feelings are distractions," she said. "They make rulers weak." "No," he replied. "They make rulers human." For a long moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was thick, a quiet storm neither dared name. Then, almost without thinking, the Queen reached out and touched his arm. The contact sent a shock through them both, a surge of energy that filled the air with light. She gasped, her fingers tightening on his skin as visions flashed before their eyes. Her childhood, the wars she fought, the first time she killed, the moment she swore never to love again. Ethan staggered, gripping her shoulders to steady himself. And in that touch she saw his life too. Earth burning under alien skies, comrades dying one by one, the hollow loneliness of survival. When the light faded, they stood trembling, breathless, their eyes locked. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I think we just saw each other." The Queen stepped back, visibly shaken. "No one has ever touched my mind and lived." Ethan's reply was quiet but firm. "Then maybe it's time someone did." After that night, nothing was the same. The Queen began to see him everywhere. In her thoughts, in her dreams, even in the rhythm of her heartbeat. When she spoke to her advisors, she heard his voice in her mind, calm and defiant. When she looked at her daughter, she saw in Lyra's smile the warmth she felt when he was near. Her council noticed the change. The Queen, who once ruled with cold logic, began making decisions guided by compassion, showing mercy where she once gave orders for destruction. Her generals grew alarmed. "You are losing yourself," they told her. "This human's influence weakens you." But she no longer believed that compassion was weakness. For the first time, she saw what true power looked like, not in domination but in restraint. Still, the voices of dissent grew louder. There were those who whispered that the Queen had been infected, that the human had ensnared her in some kind of psychic control. One night, her most trusted minister confronted her in the Hall of Echoes, the great chamber where the walls glowed with the memories of her ancestors. "My Queen," he said, bowing low. "This cannot continue. The bond you share with the human is destroying you. The council is restless. The colonies murmur of rebellion. If you will not break the bond, we will." The Queen's gaze hardened. "You would kill him?" "For your sake," he said. "For the hive's survival." Her eyes burned gold, and her voice echoed through the hall like thunder. "Then the hive does not deserve to survive." The minister tried to protest, but she silenced him with a thought, her power flaring so brightly that the very walls shuddered. "He took death for my blood," she said quietly. "He carries my essence. To destroy him would be to destroy me." And with that, she dismissed them all, her heart pounding not with fear, but with conviction. That night she went to him again, though she told no one. He was standing on the terrace, gazing up at the twin moons, his face lined with exhaustion. "You've been crying," he said gently when he saw her. She didn't deny it. "They want you dead," she whispered. "They think killing you will save me." Ethan nodded slowly. "Maybe they're right." "No," she said fiercely, stepping closer. "They're wrong. You changed something in me and I can't undo it. When I look at my people, I see what they've become, hollow, obedient, afraid to live. You gave me their reflection." He met her gaze, his voice low and steady. "Then fight for them. Show them what living really means." Her eyes glimmered in the moonlight, and for a heartbeat, all the walls between them fell. "You are bound to me," she whispered. And I to you. Perhaps that was never a curse. He smiled faintly. Maybe it was destiny. Unseen by either of them, high above the palace spires, the stars shimmered with quiet tremors. Something vast had shifted, not just between them, but in the universe itself. The hive's psychic network, once cold and uniform, now pulsed with erratic bursts of emotion. Across distant worlds, Aurelian citizens began to dream for the first time in their lives. They saw color and faces, oceans and fire. They felt joy and grief and hope. The bond between the human and the queen was no longer just theirs. It had spread, resonating across every mind connected to her. And as that wave of humanity rippled outward, the galaxy took notice. The Galactic Council, watching from afar, called it contamination. But for the Queen and Ethan, it was something simpler, something sacred. It was the beginning of life unchained. The Council's unease became fury within weeks. Across the galactic core, envoys whispered of the Queen's fall from grace, of the human corruption, spreading through the hive like a virus. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, an orbiting citadel carved from the bones of a dead star, representatives from every major species gathered beneath banners of peace that had long since lost their meaning. They spoke of containment, of quarantine, and finally of war. Humanity pleaded for restraint, sending envoys to defend Captain Ethan Ward's actions. But their words were drowned by fear. To the alien empires, the bond between the Queen and a human was not a miracle. It was blasphemy, a defiance of order itself. They saw Aurelius no longer as an empire, but as an infection, one that must be burned clean before it spread to their own kind. And so fleets began to move. The war drums of the galaxy, silent for centuries, thundered once more. Back on Aurelius, the Queen stood on the terrace of her palace and felt the gathering storm long before her scouts confirmed it. The stars beyond her world flickered with the movement of ships, council ships, 1,000 strong, advancing under the banner of righteousness. She had faced invasions before, but this one was different. The hive no longer obeyed her absolute will. Her people were waking, dreaming, feeling, and with that came uncertainty. The collective song that had once followed her every thought now trembled with confusion. Some called her a savior, others a heretic. The hive was dividing, and that division was what her enemies counted on. You must strike first, her generals urged. Destroy the council's fleets before they reach orbit. But she shook her head. If I strike, I become the thing they fear. If I hold my hand, I become the thing they destroy. She looked down at her trembling hands, light rippling faintly through her veins. Perhaps that is the fate of those who feel. Ethan stood nearby, his face drawn with exhaustion. He had seen war before, too many times, and he knew the signs. The galaxy was preparing for a massacre. You can't reason with them, he said quietly. They've already decided what you are. She turned to him, her eyes full of the strange mixture of power and vulnerability that had haunted him since the day they met. Then what am I, human? She asked softly. A queen? A curse? A fool who dared to change? He hesitated, then said, You're the only one brave enough to be both. She smiled faintly, a sad, knowing curve of her lips. Bravery, she whispered. I once thought it was just a human word. Now I think it's the only one worth remembering. The Council's first broadcast came soon after, an ultimatum transmitted across every frequency. Surrender the human, break the bond, and the hive shall be spared. The words burned through the planet's communication grids like poison. The Queen listened in silence, her face unreadable. When the message ended, the chamber fell into chaos. Her advisors begged her to comply. The ministers shouted that she could save millions by sacrificing one man. Ethan didn't wait for her to speak. Do it, he said, stepping forward. Give them what they want. The Queen's head snapped toward him, her voice sharp and cold. You presume to command me? No, he said, steady despite the tremor in his voice. I'm giving you a choice. You're the only one who believes freedom means something. Don't prove them right by chaining yourself to me. She stared at him, her expression hardening, But behind that fire he saw sorrow, deep and endless. "You would die to save my people?" "I already did," he said quietly. That night, the queen wandered the halls of the palace alone. The great crystal walls reflected her face from 1,000 angles, each one different, each one fractured. She had built an empire that stretched across galaxies, but for all her power, she could not escape the reflection of her own fear. In every piece of glass, she saw him, the human who spoke of hope as if it were something real, who faced death without hesitation. She thought of her daughter, Lyra, who now slept peacefully thanks to the blood of that same man. "What kind of ruler am I?" she wondered, "if I repay life with death?" And for the first time in her long reign, she wept. Her tears fell not as light, but as water, clear human water. When dawn came, she summoned her council. The chamber was filled with tension as she stood before them, her wings of light unfolding like fire. "You have demanded surrender," she said. "You have begged me to destroy what I have become. But I will not. The human lives." Gasps echoed through the hall. One of her generals rose, his voice trembling with anger. "You would doom us all for a creature of flesh?" She met his glare without flinching. "He is more than flesh. He is the proof that even we, the children of light, can change." The general sneered. "Then you are no longer our queen." The others followed his lead, rising one by one, their armor gleaming like knives. But before they could draw their weapons, the queen raised her hand, and light exploded across the room. When it faded, the rebels lay motionless, alive, but bound by threads of energy that shimmered like sunlight through water. "You may defy me," she said softly, "but you will not kill for ignorance." Ethan found her after the meeting, standing in the ruins of her council chamber. "You can't fight them all," he said. "Then I will stand alone," she replied. "That's not what I meant." He stepped closer, his voice low. "You've changed everything, Kareth. The galaxy doesn't forgive change. It crushes it." She looked at him, the faintest trace of a smile touching her lips. "And yet you still fight for it." "Because someone has to," he said. "Because if no one does, we stay monsters forever." Her gaze softened. "You sound like my dreams," she murmured. "I used to dream only of stars. Now I dream of oceans and rain." "That's Earth," he said. "That's home." She turned her face toward the sky. "Then maybe one day, I'll see it." The invasion began 3 days later. The Council's armada arrived in orbit, massive ships blotting out the light of the suns, their shadows falling like omens across the orange sky. The queen stood atop her palace, her people gathered below. The bond between her and Ethan pulsed stronger than ever, their hearts beating in rhythm. "This is madness," he said as the first explosions echoed in the distance. "You can still end it." She looked down at him, her expression calm but resolute. "You once said humans fight for what they believe in, even when it kills them. I understand that now." "You're not human," he said, his voice breaking. She smiled faintly. "No, Ethan. I'm something both greater and less. I am us." The first wave of the Council's assault hit the planet's defenses with the force of a dying sun. Energy cascaded through the skies, cities trembled, and the ground itself seemed to cry out. But then something happened that no one could explain. The queen closed her eyes, spreading her hands, and the planet's surface began to glow. From every city, every river, every creature that carried even a fraction of her light, energy rose into the air. A web of living power connecting them all. Ethan felt it too, the surge coursing through his blood until he could barely stand. "What are you doing?" he gasped. "Ending the war," she said. The light grew brighter, until the sky turned white. Every ship in orbit froze, its engines dead, its weapons falling silent. The armada hung motionless, suspended in time. And in that moment, every soldier, every pilot, every being across the galaxy felt what she felt. The pain of every death, the weight of every loss. For a single heartbeat, the entire galaxy understood. When the light faded, the battle was over. The Council's fleets withdrew, their leaders shaken by what they had witnessed. No one could explain it, no damage, no victory, just silence. On Aurelius, the queen collapsed, her energy flickering like a dying flame. Ethan caught her before she fell. "You can't leave me now," he whispered. She smiled weakly, her hand resting on his chest. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "I'm becoming part of what you made me." The glow in her eyes dimmed, and then, with a final breath, her light passed into him. The palace shone one last time, then fell quiet. When the people of Aurelius awoke the next morning, their queen was gone. But they felt her presence in the wind, in the rivers, in the rhythm of their hearts. The hive was no more, yet they were not lost. They were free, and among them walked a man with eyes that glowed faintly gold, carrying her memory within him. In time, they would call him the Keeper of Light, the human who had taught the gods to feel and the queen who had taught humanity to love. The world of Aurelius stood at the edge of peace and ruin. The queen's sacrifice had ended the war, but her absence had left a silence no song could fill. The great hive, the living network that once bound every Auran mind, was now broken, its perfect harmony scattered into countless individual voices. For the first time in recorded history, the Aurelian people were truly alone. To many it was freedom, to others it was unbearable chaos. The planet pulsed with unrest. Former generals declared themselves rulers of their own sectors, claiming to be the true heirs of the queen's will. Factions formed, old grudges resurfaced, and the unity that had once defined Aurelius began to fracture. In the midst of it all walked a single man, Captain Ethan Ward, the human who carried the queen's light within him. Her final words still echoed in his mind, soft and unending. "I'm not leaving. I'm becoming part of what you made me." He didn't understand it at first. For weeks after her death, he had wandered the empty halls of the palace, haunted by her voice. Every step he took left a faint shimmer of gold on the ground, every breath a ripple of warmth through the cold air. The medics whispered that he was changing again, that the queen's essence had fused completely with his body, rewriting his DNA in ways even their science could not comprehend. Some called him a new god, others a cursed relic. He ignored them all. He wasn't a god. He was a man carrying the memory of something far greater than himself, a memory that refused to fade. He could feel her within him, not as a ghost, but as presence. When he closed his eyes, he could see what she once saw, the vast expanse of her world, her people, her pain. And though he tried to stay silent, her will spoke through him like the whisper of a star reborn. It began small. When the riots in the capital reached the palace gates, Ethan stepped between the warring crowds, his voice amplified by something beyond sound. "She didn't die for this," he said, his words resonating across the plaza. The fighting stopped, if only for a heartbeat. The air shimmered, golden light radiating from him, faint but unmistakable, the same light that had once poured from the queen herself. The soldiers froze, lowering their weapons. The citizens fell to their knees, whispering her name in reverence. "She lives through him," they said. The queen's heart beats in human flesh. The moment spread across the city, then across the world, carried by the psychic remnants of the old hive. Ethan tried to deny it, but deep inside, he felt the truth. The queen's essence, her mind, her compassion, her love, was now part of him. He was not just her bond. He was her continuation. But not everyone welcomed the rebirth. The Aurelian High Order, a group of surviving warlords and ministers, saw him as a threat to their power. "He is not our queen," they declared. "He is the infection she brought into our veins." In secret, they convened a council to decide his fate. When diplomacy failed, they turned to something darker, the creation of the pureborn, soldiers engineered to resist the queen's influence. Their bodies were stripped of emotion, their minds severed from the psychic echo of the old hive. They were everything the queen had abandoned, obedient, ruthless, and hollow. Within weeks, the pureborn army marched on the capital, their banners glowing cold blue, a declaration that the age of light and feeling was over. Ethan saw them coming long before the alarm sounded. He could feel them, an emptiness pressing against the edge of his mind like static. They had no thoughts, no emotions, just silence. And that silence terrified him more than any weapon ever could. He stood atop the palace balcony as the first explosions lit the horizon. The city below descended into panic. "They're coming to erase what she left," one of the palace guards cried. Ethan turned to him, his eyes glowing faintly gold. "Then we remind them what she taught us." He descended into the streets, unarmed, his presence alone enough to rally the frightened citizens. Where he walked, light followed. Where he spoke, people listened. He wasn't giving commands. He was reminding them of who they had become. "You don't need a queen," he told them. "You need each other. You need what she gave you, the courage to feel." When the pureborn reached the gates, they found no army waiting, only civilians standing together, unarmed but unyielding. The silence of the pureborn met the hum of countless living hearts. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the leader of the pureborn stepped forward, his armor glowing faintly, his voice mechanical and hollow. "You are an abomination," he said. "You are not one of us." Ethan met his gaze calmly. "You're right," he said. "But neither was she." The soldier raised his weapon. The crowd flinched. And then the light erupted, not from Ethan's hands, but from everywhere. From the people, from the ground, from the very air. It was the Queen's light, resurrected not in one body, but in millions. The bond that had once connected her to her people flared alive again, not through control, but through choice. Each mind willingly opened, each heart willingly joined. The pureborn hesitated, their aim faltering as the light washed over them. The leader fired, but the shot never reached its mark. It dissolved into gold dust before it could strike. The energy consumed the battlefield, not as destruction, but as memory. When the light faded, the pureborn stood motionless. Their weapons fell. Their eyes, once cold and dead, now shimmered faintly with color. They began to tremble, gasping as if breathing for the first time. "What is this?" one whispered. Ethan stepped forward. "It's what she wanted you to have," he said softly. "A soul." The soldiers fell to their knees weeping, not from fear, but from feeling. The war was over before it began. The light spread outward, healing what was broken, silencing the fires, turning despair into stillness. Above the palace, the skies of Auran burned gold, the twin suns aligning for the first time in centuries. The hive was reborn, but it was no longer a cage. It was a chorus, a unity born not from control but from will. In the days that followed, Ethan withdrew from the public eye. His work was done. The new Auran order rose not under a throne, but under a shared council of leaders, scientists, poets, and farmers alike. They built a society of voices, not commands. They called their new age the Era of Dawn. Statues of the Queen and the human who carried her light stood side by side in the capital square. Yet some nights, when the winds whispered through the glowing gardens, travelers swore they saw a man walking among the stars, his eyes shining gold, his voice carrying a single message across the void. Humanity lives wherever compassion endures. Ethan's name faded into myth, but the legacy of what he and the Queen created endured. The Galactic Council, shaken by what they witnessed, disbanded their armies and rewrote the codes of war. And across the galaxy, wherever humans and Aurans met, the same phrase was spoken. A reminder of the day one act of selflessness rewrote the laws of life itself. He protected a child, and the universe remembered. The centuries that followed were not kind, yet they were alive in a way the galaxy had never known. The world of Auran, once a throne of obedience, became the beating heart of something new, a civilization built on balance rather than control. What began with one human act of sacrifice had spread beyond species, beyond politics, beyond even the concept of power itself. The hive no longer existed, yet its echoes remained, reborn through choice. Every Auran now lived as an individual, yet the faint pulse of shared empathy connected them still. A living memory of the Queen's light and the human who carried her soul. Statues and stories became shrines. Songs were written about the bloodbound who defied the council, the the soldier who stood beside a queen and made gods remember what it meant to feel. But history, as always, turned truth into legend. Over time, the story blurred. Some said the human ascended to the stars with the queen. Others said he lived among her people, aging slower than any mortal should, his body still glowing faintly with her light. None could agree, but all agreed on one truth, that humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Far beyond the Aurelian system, the Galactic Council never recovered from its humiliation. The fleets that once ruled through fear had been silenced by something they could not weaponize: a single human's compassion. For generations, the Council tried to erase that history, to call it myth, but the memory of Aurelius refused to die. Whispers of the human light reached even the most distant colonies, spreading faster than the Council's decrees could suppress it. Then came the rebellions, planets once chained by politics and hierarchy rising to demand their own voices, their own freedom. Aurelius became their symbol. Humanity became their mirror. The galaxy that had once mocked Earth as backward now looked toward it with reverence, wondering how such a fragile race could possess strength that no empire could conquer. On Aurelius itself, the people built a new order, a council of equals, where decisions were not commanded but shared. Yet amid their peace, a shadow grew. The pureborn, once freed from their emotionless state, had begun to question their place in this world. They were the remnants of the old order, beings forged without the capacity for choice, suddenly burdened with it. Many could not bear the weight of feeling. Some withdrew into silence. Others sought meaning among the stars. And among them, one rose who still remembered the light: Commander Auran, once leader of the pureborn army. He had been there when Ethan stood unarmed beneath the golden sky. He had seen what compassion did, and it haunted him. For years, he searched for the truth of the man who had changed him. His quest led him beyond the edge of the known galaxy, following faint readings of Aurelian and human energy intertwined. What he found was not a grave, but a signal, weak, rhythmic, pulsing in both frequencies at once. It was a heartbeat, ancient but alive. Auran followed it to a world the Council had forbidden any to approach, a dead moon orbiting a dying star. The surface was scarred with ruins, its air thin and cold. Yet beneath the dust, buried deep within a forgotten temple of light, he found it. A sarcophagus of living crystal, glowing faintly gold. Inside lay a figure that was neither entirely human nor entirely Auran. His skin shimmered softly, veins glowing with the same golden light that once filled the palace skies. His face was peaceful, untouched by time. Auran fell to his knees, unable to speak. He reached out, and the sarcophagus responded to his touch, whispering through his mind in a voice both familiar and eternal. Humanity is not a body. It is the will to care, even when the stars forget how. The realization struck him like thunder. The man was not dead, he was waiting. The fusion of human and Auran essence had placed him in stasis, half in life, half in energy. The queen's gift had not ended with her death. She had given him immortality not as a curse, but as a promise. Auran activated the beacon hidden within the chamber. The light that burst from the tomb rose through the crust of the moon, cutting across the void like dawn breaking through eternal night. Across the galaxy, the signal awakened old memories, calling to those who still carried fragments of the queen's gift. Empaths, dreamers, outcasts, they all heard it. Within months, fleets began to converge on the dead star, not in war but in pilgrimage. Humans and Aurans stood side by side again, drawn by the same hope. When they arrived, the sarcophagus opened, and the man within rose, eyes burning with the light of two souls. Ethan Ward, no longer just human, no longer merely legend, stepped into the fading sunlight. His first breath in centuries carried the weight of every story told about him. Around him stood descendants of both races, watching in reverent silence. "Why have you come?" he asked, his voice calm, resonant, ageless. Auran bowed his head. "Because the galaxy has forgotten. They fight again. They fear again. They've turned your story into myth." Ethan looked to the horizon, where the light of distant worlds shimmered faintly. "Then we will remind them." He raised his hand, and the air shimmered. The energy of the queen still flowed within him, but now it felt different, deeper, older, as though the universe itself remembered her name. "The queen gave me her heart," he said softly, "but she left you all her legacy. You are her people now. You are her light." And so began the second dawn. Under Ethan's guidance, humanity and Aurans forged something beyond alliance. A living bond between species, a shared council of minds and hearts. For the first time, the Galactic Council dissolved peacefully, its members joining the new concord of empaths. Warships became arcs of learning. Soldiers became ambassadors. Children born from both species carried traits of each: human resilience, Auran empathy, and eyes that shimmered with faint gold. The galaxy that once bled now sang again. And through it all, Ethan walked among them, not as ruler, not as god, but as reminder. His presence alone was enough to keep peace alive. Yet even peace has its shadows. In the quiet of the Concord's new capital, under a sky of twin suns, Ethan often stood alone at dusk, staring into the distance. He could feel her there still, the queen, woven into every heartbeat of Aurans, every breath of wind that touched his face. Sometimes he spoke aloud, though he knew she no longer needed words. "You were right," he would whisper. "Feeling didn't destroy us. It made us whole." And somewhere deep in the fabric of the universe, where light and memory meet, he could swear he heard her reply, "Then our work is not yet done." As centuries passed, the legend of the bloodbound became more than story. It became scripture. Across the stars, humans and Aurans built temples not to gods, but to the idea that compassion could conquer entropy itself. And in every telling of the tale, it always began the same way, with one human, one act, and one impossible choice. He protected a child. The mother saved his life. Together, they saved creation. Thank you for listening. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that even in the endless darkness of space, humanity's courage and compassion can light the way, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join us again for the next journey on Sci-Fi Tales, where we remind the stars that humanity never dies. It simply becomes the light that guides the universe forward.